Today we're talking about cold therapy and its impact on peripheral blood circulation. Let's get into it. As always, I want to give a shout out to my research team for putting this all together. We will, of course, link to the studies in the description as always. And let's talk about peripheral blood flow. So first of all, what is peripheral blood circulation? Peripheral blood flow determines oxygen and nutrient delivery to the tissues. So peripheral blood flow is affected by vascular resistance and blood pressure, which in turn varies with cardiac function. So essentially, it's how well your blood is doing to get oxygen to your muscles. The first study is a study that came out in 2016. It was a randomized controlled study coming out of Baltimore. So basically in this study, they subjected 20 healthy subjects to different workouts and different recovery mechanisms. Changes in muscle oxygenation were monitored continuously using near-infrared spectroscopy. Muscle performance was measured with isokinetic dynamometry during each fatiguing bout. Skin temperature, heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle soreness ratings were also assessed. So half of these subjects were given cold water therapy as a recovery mechanism, and half of them were not. Cold water immersion causes peripheral vasoconstriction that results in a central pooling of blood, followed by peripheral vasodilation immediately after emerging from the cold water. This mechanism may improve the rate at which muscles become reoxygenated. Near-infrared spectroscopy is a non-invasive and direct method to study local tissue oxygenation and hemodynamic by monitoring changes in oxy and deoxyhemoglobin. Subjects were randomly allocated to either passive recovery or cold water immersion based on a computer-generated block randomization code. Now, the study that we linked to does show all of the graphs and whatnot from this particular study. It goes a little bit deeper into the protocol. In the discussion section, they said, although we observed effects of cold water immersion on heart rate, skin temperature, and muscle oxygenation, the effect was not reflected in muscle performance. Studies that examine the effect of cold water immersion on endurance exercises up to 40 minutes show favorable results, whereas studies on intermittent or short duration exercises are less consistent. Furthermore, the beneficial effect seems to be less obvious in local muscular fatigue protocols. The perception of muscle soreness was significantly lower in our cold water immersion group 24 hours post-fatigue exercise. This finding supports previous reports that cold water immersion improves perception of recovery after exercise. Our study uses concentric mode of contraction as the fatigue protocol. Further studies on the effect of cold water immersion in aiding recovery from eccentric-induced muscle damage are clearly needed. There are several limitations to this study. Near-infrared spectroscopy only monitors oxygenation changes in a small area of the muscle, but perfusion heterogeneity may exist in different regions within a muscle. Cold water immersion induces varied physiological responses depending on the exercise mode, duration, and intensity. The present study examines the effect of cold water immersion on muscle oxygenation in the localized muscle fatigue protocol. Future studies using cold water immersion recovery in actual athletic practice or competition should be considered. They went on to say that within the cold water immersion group, they were able to measure an increase in muscle oxygenation, which probably added to the perception of decreased muscle soreness. However, even with that increase in muscle oxygenation, there was no specific effect on muscle performance. So what this is saying is that yes, the way the blood constricts and then flows during and after a cold plunge can absolutely help the muscles. It's not necessarily going to help the muscles perform in a better way. You're just going to feel better. The second study we looked at was looking at dynamic adaptation of the peripheral circulation to cold exposure over time. Circulatory flow in the extremities adjusts rapidly and dynamically to cold exposure and also to the thermal state of the body. Shortly upon exposure to cold environments, a sympathetically mediated vasoconstriction results in reduced blood flow to the peripherals in favor of a central pooling of blood in the torso and deep body core. Due to the vasoconstriction of the peripheral microvasculature and the high surface area to volume ratio, the skin temperature of the fingers and toes tends to rapidly and exponentially decrease to a level approaching that of the ambient environment. Prolonged cooling increases the tonus of the precapillary sphincters, leading to reduced nutritional blood flow. This in turn may lead to tissue damage and even necrosis. They were particularly looking at how it affects humans residing or working in cold environments and how they exhibit a stronger cold-induced vasodilation reaction in the peripherals than those living in warm regions of the world, leading to a general assumption that thermal response to local cold exposure can be systematically improved by natural acclimatization or specific acclimation. One problem with this particular article, there's a lack of consensus in definitions and protocols that took place. So it's very difficult to compare results across the studies because there was no real control. Ethnic differences were taken into account. And then they also did look at previous studies from the past that had taken place as well. So it's kind of a cross section of a couple different studies. Overall, while broad improvements in thermal responses in individuals who live or work in cold environments are possible, microcirculatory adaptations and changes in the CIVD response in the fingers and toes appear to be neither guaranteed nor predictable. Much of the evidence for adaptation has involved cross-sectional studies, but significant gaps remain in understanding the contribution of genetic or morphological differences across different ethnic populations in cold response, along with the role of self-selection when considering comparisons across different occupations. So enhanced circulation to the extremities is presumed to occur with repeated exposure to cold, serving as a protective mechanism against peripheral cold injury. However, systematic improvements in CIVD are neither guaranteed nor predictable, and individuals should not rely on improving peripheral cold tolerance through repeated cold exposure. The field is confused by lack of standardization in definitions and methodology. An emphasis should be on investigating the underlying mechanisms behind peripheral blood flow changes with local cold exposure. So essentially, if you're using cold exposure to try to get better circulation in your toes and your fingers, what it's saying is there's absolutely no guarantee that it's going to happen. There's not enough data out there that proves that it will work. Now, a lot of people do cold therapy as a way to help improve blood flow. So it's not saying that it won't work. It's just saying that it might not necessarily work for everybody. The third article we looked at came from Science Direct and the Journal of Thermal Biology. It was looking at cardiovascular and mood responses to an acute bout of cold water immersion. And this study came out in 2023. Their purpose was to investigate the effects of an acute bout of CWI on vascular shear stress and effects positive or negative. 16 healthy adults completed one 15-minute bout of cold water immersion. Self-reported effect was assessed as pre-CWI, 30-minute post-immersion, and 180-minute post-immersion on all participants. One of the ways they did this was by taking blood samples. Blood samples were collected at after 1 minute and 15-minute of CWI, 30-minute post-immersion, and 180-minute post-immersion to quantify serum, endorphins, and cortisol. They then compared the two. Positive effect did not change, but negative effect was lower at 180 minutes post-immersion. Cortisol was also shown to be lower at 180 minutes post-immersion. And we have done a video on cortisol before and how it's been proven that doing an ice bath will not raise your cortisol levels, but over time your cortisol levels will go down post-plunge. The finding was that an acute bout of CWI minimally affects shear stress patterns, but may benefit mental health by reducing negative feelings and cortisol levels. So this exploratory study demonstrates that during an acute bout of cold water immersion, there were minimal changes to peripheral vascular shear stress in the arteries, and the greatest change occurred at the end of the 30-minute post-immersion period. Furthermore, 3 hours after immersion, participants reported less negative effect and cortisol levels were reduced. Cold water immersion is utilized across multiple disciplines and recreationally to target performance, recovery, cardiovascular health, and psychological well-being. Based on the results, it appears that vascular function may not be directly affected by the use of acute cold water immersion as performed in this study. Additionally, the coinciding subjective ratings with the objective levels of circulating stress biomarkers highlight the potential use of cold water immersion to target psychological health. Now, this one I find super fascinating because I am a huge advocate of using cold therapy for psychological health, and especially mental and emotional growth. And I like that we finally have a study that actually quantifies that and clarifies it. And of course, I cannot talk about mental and emotional growth with cold water immersion without talking about Ice Wellness Journal and subscription. So Ice Wellness Journal is designed to help you track your mental and emotional states during and after ice baths so that you can see how everything that you do during the day, what time of day you plunge, and what the temperature of the water is affect your overall mood, your ability to handle stress, etc. Our challenges with our monthly subscription takes it a little bit further. We give you mantras that you can help get through your day, get a little meditation in, and get de-stressed that way, as well as adding in post-plunge workouts so you can feel a little bit better after the plunge, get some exercise in, feel good, look good, and basically just all around win with cold therapy. As always, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you liked it, please do like and subscribe. Share it with somebody who might be able to benefit from the information that we share. Check out Ice Wellness if you get a chance, and we'll see you next time.